Well, Australia's cooperative and mutual sector has seen an 8.4% increase in annual revenue against a backdrop of recurring domestic and global economic challenges. Joining me now is Melina Morrison, the Chief Executive of the Business Council of Co-operatives and Mutual. Great to have you with us, Melina. So I guess what we're looking at here is some movement in terms of what's happening with businesses and how this is really going to, I guess, be helped out by some of this global macro picture that we're seeing?
Well, we are in a very interesting business sector as cooperatives and mutuals. We exist to benefit our members. We don't have shareholders. So in those very inflationary conditions where there is lots of volatility, there's lots of uncertainty, there are geopolitical shocks coming, we have a very resilient business model. And that's what our National Mutual Economy Report, which is our annual State of the Sector report, showed this year, is that we're growing and we're being very modest about the way that we spend our members' money to grow, but make sure that they are the ones that are benefiting.
So how are you spending it? And when you say being moderate here, obviously you still do want to see some returns. So the top 100 cooperatives recording record annual revenue of nearly $51 billion last financial year.
Yes, so these are a really important part of the Australian economy. They're very good at bootstrapping in a crisis. I mean, we've just had a fuel crisis, we're still in it, and this is an example of a stress test. Another example was the COVID pandemic, and what we found is that cooperatives and mutuals are incentivized to think about their users, who are also their members and basically their owners. And so that the way they think about using capital in the business is very much what is needed to sustain continuity of services, keep high quality products and services viable for their members, and look after their local workforce. These are 100% domestically owned businesses, and as we can see, they are a significant contributor to GDP.
Yeah, and I believe something like 8 in 10 Aussies belong to either a co-op or a mutual, but they do fly under the radar. So do you think that some of these organisations are not receiving the same policy attention as potentially listed companies?
Look, really, education and awareness is the bugbear of the sector. We sometimes say we're missing in plain sight. We are there, but we're just not thought about when we're thinking about the economy being comprised of different types of businesses. They are really important to the essential services that, as I said, 8 in 10 Australians rely on every day. These are in areas like financial services, health policies, motoring services, the things that we just take for granted every day. So we do find that there isn't a lot of awareness for cooperatives and mutuals, but it's not only in policy, it's more generally. It's great to have a conversation with you today, Juliet, because the financial media is a very key, important part of growing awareness of cooperatives and mutuals.
Well, thank you, and thank you for coming on. Now, we've seen the UK government commit to doubling the size of its co-op and mutual sector. Do you think Australia should follow suit?
Well, absolutely, because the things that cooperatives and mutuals can deliver, which the UK government has recognised, and why they're committed to doubling the size of cooperatives and mutuals in the British economy, are the same here. We need businesses that are incentivised to help Australians with cost of living pressures. We need businesses which shape the market for better outcomes for consumers, and they introduce, really importantly, diversity into the economy. In more and more markets, we have become more dependent on a smaller number of listed businesses, and this causes market concentration, which diminishes consumer choice, but also the competitive dynamics, the productivity and growth that we need so much in Australia, just as they're trying to seek in the UK economy.
So we obviously know that we have a housing supply issue. You want cooperative housing to reach around 10% of total housing stock. Is that actually realistic? What kind of policy change would we need to see?
Well, starting with awareness, it's absolutely realistic. It might take some time to get there, but if we look at like jurisdictions like Canada, across a lot of Northern Europe, and even in the UK itself, there is a diversity of housing models. cooperatives sit between private rental and private home ownership, and they create a model of housing that is so valuable to those 30% of Australians that now rely on private rental. They can help Australians save more quickly for their own home, for a housing deposit, but they can also supply security of tenure for really important parts of the workforce, essential workers, teachers, retail workers, and people on low to moderate incomes. So we need to start with attention to this business model, this housing model. It exists in Australia, 1% of housing stock at the moment. So to grow it, we need to start with awareness, and we need to find a way to fast track some more capital investment into this build to rent model.
Well, you say financial media helps, but also what helps is talking to the people that actually make the decisions. So what specific legislative or financial reforms are you seeking from Canberra?
Well, long term, we'd like to see a commitment from Canberra to double the size of, or at least to grow the cooperative and mutual economy in recognition that it brings some of those productivity, business dynamic, competition and choice factors to the Australian economy and can help Australians solve some of those most pressing issues, such as access to affordable housing, to supply of care in regional areas is another important area of cooperative development. But what we really need to focus then on is a legislative and regulatory environment that puts cooperatives and mutuals on a level playing field with other types of business models. There have been some important legislative changes in the last 5 or so years, and that's enabled cooperatives and mutuals to access growth capital, which they couldn't access before without triggering their demutualisation. And we've been through a lot of demutualisation events in Australia. Now it's time to come back from that wave and to grow the market share of cooperatives and mutuals, starting with regulation and legislation that recognises the unique different characteristics of cooperatives and mutuals.
So in a sense, I'm hearing you kind of want this to turn from niche to mainstream. I mean, it already serves 38 million memberships across Australia, so we probably should be talking about them as a bigger part of the solution here.
Yes, we really should be thinking about this as economic development. You know, these business models are very well purposed to helping Australians and markets where other business models are finding it hard to get a business case that stacks up to receive the sorts of services like care or housing or sustainable agriculture, retail options. We need to see this as a business model that can really swarm into those markets and provide an alternative way to provide the business environment that people need to gain equitable access to products and services. So let's think about this as some sort of infrastructure task rather than just a question of legislative or regulatory change.